Hey, Chris, we've got another amazing person, another amazing human being on our podcast today that our guests are going to be excited to hear. You know, Dave is the epitome of a giver, a great entrepreneur. His business, Uncommon Goods, great differentiating business that has grown to be one of the greatest in its space. And Dave, we're excited to have you on board today. Thanks for being a Ditch Digger CEO. Dave, repeat your last name for us, 'cause I don't want to get it wrong.
Sure, it's Bolotsky.
Gosh, I had it right too.
It,
Bolotsky.
it,
It's
it
easy.
means it means from the swamp.
Really? I love it.
I made the mistake of telling one of my high school friends that, and he never let me live it down.
That's awesome. From the swamp. And from the swamp. So what the name is? What nationality is that? And what region of the world would have come up with that?
So it was Russia, Poland, Belarus area. I think it's now part of Belarus. And my grandparents on both sides of my family emigrated to the US in the early 1900s.
Wow, that's really cool. I call myself a ditch digger, kind of hillbilly, all different things because I came from a rough environment as a kid, and I love where I came from because I think it makes us who we are. But I kind of like your name better than mine now. I think that's a better name, way better name. I love it. But
I was not a ditch digger, but I did work at an animal shelter cleaning up dog and cat excrement. So
there you go. You're right
good,
there.
good training for CEO.
Exactly. Starting from the bottom is a good thing. So Dave, welcome, man, to Ditch Digger CEO. Really appreciate having you here. And we really just want you to tell your story, and we want to kind of interject with questions and stuff here and there as we go along. And at the end, really, Chris's job as our producer is a lot of things. But what I love about Chris is he pulls out kind of like the nuggets of success, the things that created some success in your life as well as it could in many lives, right? So that's kind of what we do. So we like to start kind of from the beginning. What kind of upbringing did you have, and how did that bring you to where you are today?
Sure. So I grew up on the Lower East Side of New York City of Manhattan, which is where a lot of immigrants, I come from a Jewish family, a lot of Jewish immigrants settled in that area. And New York City was going through a difficult period economically in the early 1970s. My dad wanted to move out to the suburbs. My mom did not. And my mom ended up, thankfully, she was okay, but she got mugged in the elevator of our building. And she said, "Okay, Marvin, we can move out of the city." Uh, and so I went from, my father worked for the United Nations. And so I had gone as a young child to a school with kids from all over the world. They were children of people who worked for the United Nations. So it was a fascinating education about different cultures, different people. And then I moved to the suburbs where everybody was the same and tried to be the same. They all had the Ralph Lauren polo thing on their shirts, and I felt like kind of a misfit, I would say. I'd be, had, I know, Gary, you had a challenging relationship with your dad. I would say I had a little bit of that as well. In his later years, we became extremely close, but growing up, he would tell me, "You do what I say while you live in my house." And I always wanted a reason for everything. And he didn't often want to provide a reason other than because I said so. But he and my mom, like if I could have picked my parents, I could not have picked better parents. Really instilled in me the mindset that anything I put my mind to, I can do. And I believed that they believed it. So even though I didn't always believe in myself, their confidence in me, I think, really provided me with a powerful foundation. And the other thing they really taught me was not to find my self-worth through the eyes of other people. It was really believe
Wow.
in yourself, follow your own path, don't follow the crowd, which made moving to the suburbs a little more challenging because that was all about following the crowd, and I was not following the crowd. I was an incredibly shy kid, and um, I got in a lot of fights when I was young because I got picked on because I was skinny and I had long hair and looked a little like a girl. And, you know, while I was not strong physically, mentally, I was not going to take any crap from anyone.
I love it.
So it was a challenging childhood. I became very, we had a dog, and I was very focused on animals, and became a vegetarian at the age of 11 when I connected the dots that my parents are basically paying people to kill animals for me to eat. And I said, if I'm not going to do that myself, why should I be, through my parents, paying somebody to do it? So I became a vegetarian, which gave people yet another opportunity to make fun of me because in 1974, being a
Yeah.
vegetarian was not the hip or cool thing to do. I was the only one in my school and was considered kind of a freak. So,
So we're the same age. So I was born in 63, and so I remember 11 years old. I can imagine that. I knew nobody, right, that was a vegetarian, and boy, the kids would pick any reason to pick on you at all, right? So that shouldn't be a big deal, but it would have been back then for sure.
yeah. So I think that gave me a lot of the intestinal fortitude that, when things have been challenging, and I've led a very blessed life. I mean, definitely as I look around the world, I mean, starting with my parents, my sister, my wife, my kids, like I've had, as close to a perfect life as one could hope for. But, with everybody, there are challenges. And having some of those struggles as a child, I think really helped me build a backbone.
For
Uh,
sure.
so let's see. So that's sort of my childhood. Um, I was a good student, um, and um, I got into colleges like Columbia, University of Pennsylvania, a lot of top schools. But I mentioned that my dad and I were not exactly like that uh, as when I was a teenager, and I didn't want to take a penny of his money for college.
Wow.
And so I applied for financial aid, and these schools understandably said, screw you, kid. Every kid is going to say they're independent from their parents so that their parents can get the financial aid. So I got no financial aid. So I ended up going to state school, State University of New York at Binghamton, paid my way through college. I started my own lawn mowing business during the summers and made enough money uh, to basically pay for college. Um, and then
Okay, so let's go back there. So I did some of the same similar stuff, right? As far as lawn mowing, newspaper route, shovel
I,
snow. I did
I
everything to
had
make money.
I
And
had a paper route too back when there were newspapers.
there you go. Okay, so tell us a little bit about that because I mean that's I'm very confident that myself and so many people that are successful in life had whether it was instilled upon themselves or the parents saying, hey, I'm not giving you anything, you're 13 years old now, go find some work and make your own money, right? Or hey, you know what, mom, dad, I don't want your money, I don't need your money, I
Yeah.
want to make my own. Okay, either way, it was an amazing experience as a young person to understand how to make money, how to collect money, how to make a profit. Tell us a little bit about that, like kind of like from the newspaper route, how much you made a week back then, and then to the lawn mowing and all the stuff, the other stuff you were doing through college.
So the paper route, I don't remember that well. I was probably 13 or 14. The thing I remember the most is trying to collect money. I would collect once a week, and somebody, if the homeowner's not home, you document that, hey, I've got to get 2 weeks next week. Well, I go to this house, and the woman there starts yelling at me and telling me that she paid me the prior week and could not have been more obnoxious. I remember going home, telling my mother, and my mom called her up, read her the riot act because she actually knew her. And the next week, the woman was terribly apologetic, but it overcome my shyness, being very shy. I remember I had a neighbor who was, I think, a lonely housewife and just wanted to talk and talk and talk. And I had to go to the bathroom really badly. And I remember just finally having to say something, but it was just good training for me to
Sure.
learn how to deal with people and then deal with adults. Um,
Okay, well, how about you? So I had it's a very similar experience, so it's fun to listen to you say this. Okay, now tell me about tipping. Okay, I learned to do different things to get a bigger tip, right? And it was the other newspaper, right, this is the Chicago Tribune back then, and other kids would just throw the paper in the lawn and get close to the front door or close to the front sidewalk, right? And I would put it in plastic. I would put it inside the door. I would, I'd put a little note if it was holidays, and Happy Halloween, and put little notes inside. And I've tried a lot of things, and eventually got mine was $6 a week is what I made, and I collect every 2 weeks, so it's $12 every 2 weeks. And often I went from getting a dollar tip or so, maybe 50 cents, a dollar every 2 weeks per customer. I had about 35 customers to eventually getting $2-3, right? And so it's kind of funny because kind of experienced, right, what it's like to test your levels of customer service, test your level of satisfaction by the tips they might bring, and the conversations, like you're saying, so often, like if you just were patient and would sit there and listen to that little old lady who didn't have anybody else to talk to for an extra 20 minutes, 10, 15, 20 minutes, the tip got a little bigger sometimes, right? So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, I think you were a lot more savvy than I was back then. I don't, I mean, I'm sure I was committed to good customer service, but don't remember the tip angle. But the lawn mowing business was way more lucrative.
Oh yeah.
I worked, I was in some ways less ambitious then. I was like, hey, I can work 3 days a week and go to the beach the other days. And I was making maybe, I would work 10 to 12 hours a day and make something like $100, $125, which back then, this is
Huge.
1981, was big money.
Yes.
Um, and the one problem with my formula is that when it rains, you can't mow lawns,
Mhm.
but you can go to the beach, but you don't want to go to the beach. Fortunately, it wasn't that big a problem, but I got to enjoy my summer and make a good living, and I did that for a couple of years before working at the animal shelter, which was the toughest job I ever had.
Wow, so the animal shelter picking up after these animals, right? Watching animals, maybe sick, right? Animals that might be put to death. I don't, tell us about that.
So that was what was called a no-kill shelter, which
Oh yeah.
sounds very humane until you realize that it's overcrowded. Uh,
Mhm.
I had to buy steel-toed boots so I could effectively break up dog fights by kicking them in the jaw.
Wow.
Yeah, I went from this somewhat soft animal lover to learning some cold, hard truths, which is, if you're this bleeding heart and you say, hey, I want to keep all these animals alive, but they have no quality of life because it's overcrowded,
Yeah.
it was tough. It was very tough.
I can imagine. Yeah. And what a couple lessons you learn there, right? And, you might have a position and an opinion on how something should be done, but then when you're in the thick of it, boy, it might change a little bit, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it's
Yeah.
a friend of mine once said to me when I was being judgmental of him, he said, "Don't judge a man till you've walked a mile in his shoes."
I love it.
It's a very true statement.
Or steel toe boots. I like it. No, I think it's so true, right? And that's where, we talk, you and I talked prior about, the ability to communicate when you don't agree with somebody, right? And a friend, a family member that you don't cut ties with because you don't agree, just because you don't agree, right? The best thing is when you can reach across and talk to somebody about subjects you don't agree on and still love each other when it's all said and done. And that
Yeah,
is as tough as that is, right? But that's that same mindset you just mentioned, right? And until you walk in somebody else's shoes, don't judge them. Don't judge them. Love them for who they are, and have great conversations on why you might disagree.
totally agree.
So tell us about that. Tell us about then college, and then tell us about your business, your first business that you got into, and where that went.
Sure. So I was really, in addition to being a big animal lover, I was also a big music lover. I was really a loner growing up and listening to music, especially angry bands like The Clash, meant a lot to me. And so I ended up in college working at the college record store because there were records back then. The CD had not yet come out.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, and I worked at the record store, also worked on the college radio station. And my dream was to start my own record label. That was my dream. And I ended up getting elected to run the record store, which was also a great experience. I didn't kiss up to the general manager of the store, and basically whoever the existing managers nominated to be their successors. There was an election, but it was basically a shoo-in. If the existing managers anointed you as their successor, everybody would vote for them. Well, I took it real, so I did not get that nomination. Somebody who the GM really flirted with and liked got the nomination. But I worked on my speech. I talked to people who worked at the store. I came up with all these ideas for improvements, including, you worked for free when you worked at the store. And the last 3 weeks of the semester, nobody would show up because it's finals week. And I thought, hey, here's a great win-win solution. Let's, as a show of appreciation for our workers, tell them instead of working for free or an employee discount, we'll also give you a free record at the end of the semester, but you can only miss something like 1 or 2 shifts. So we wouldn't have the mass abandonment before finals. And that was a very popular and fairly inexpensive move. And I ended up getting elected in a landslide. I turned the business around. It was not a very successful business when I came in, made it much more successful. And again, I had this dream of working for a record label. I applied for all these record labels. I was very idealistic. And so even though the father of a high school friend of mine worked for a major record label, I thought it was immoral to reach out to him because I should get the job based on my merits, not based on who I knew. So take a wild guess how successful I was landing a job at a record label. Not highly successful. So fast forward, all my friends have jobs, and it's June after I graduated from college, gainfully unemployed, living with mom and dad, hating life. And a high school friend of mine, while I was still in college, he's a year older, had suggested I work on Wall Street. And I said, Mark, Wall Street's a bunch of blood-sucking parasites. You won't catch me dead there. Well, that was maybe October of my senior year. Fast forward 9 months, living with mom and dad. I take my tail, plant it firmly between my legs, call my friend Mark up and say, Hey, Mark, tell me about these Wall Street jobs. And he he told me how I could go about applying. I sent out 20 letters to heads of research on Wall Street, got an interview. Before the interview, I went in like 4 days early and asked, this is before the internet, I asked, can I get copies of your research report? I want to read them before the interview, which I think nobody had ever done. And I got a job working for a woman named Maggie Gilliam, who was the world's expert on Walmart and was buddies with Sam Walton, founder
Wow.
of Walmart, and somebody that I think Bernie Marcus, founder of the Home Depot. She was very close with him as well. And I was her glorified number cruncher. So I sat in a windowless office 70 hours a week, entering numbers in a spreadsheet. But that,
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so this is 1985, basically, right?
yes, exactly.
So think about that. I mean, if you invested in, so Bernie was a great friend and mentor of mine. I love this. I love Bernie a lot. He passed away, as you know, right the day before Election Day last
Yeah.
year. But Bernie was a spectacular human being, and I never knew Sam Walton, but everybody I know that knew him said the same thing. If you want somebody, you want to be mentored by somebody that's got crazy work ethic, that's very focused, or these are two guys that are there, and also givers, right? They also
Yes.
huge givers back to society. But boy, to be around Maggie that had those contacts that have been amazing. What anything you learned back then that kind of carried you through with who you are today when you think about these titans that you actually had, somebody that was connected to these
Yeah,
titans.
and I actually through her got to meet them and got to know them a bit. Uh,
Wow.
so uh, definitely influenced to a huge extent. The biggest, I would say, is the mentality of ownership. Um, Bernie would talk about the inverted pyramid, which is
Yep.
basically a fancy word for an upside down triangle.
Yes.
And he said, he and Arthur, who ran the company together, Arthur Blank, we're
Hmm.
at the bottom of the pyramid, the customer's at the top, and my job, Bernie Marcus, is to serve our team to make sure they have the tools and resources in order to be able to serve the boss, our customer. And so that I never forgot. I was also really impressed by the fact that Bernie and Arthur would meet all store managers. Okay. They would be part of the orientation. And I've taken that to heart for the 26 years of our business. I meet every single seasonal hire as well as year-round hire in person. During COVID, I'll do some remotely, but I meet all of our warehouse employees face to face and talk to them about our company philosophy. And so I would say those are a couple of things. Then there's, one other thing I would say, which wasn't necessarily a view that Bernie or Sam espoused, uh, but they practiced, which is something that a colleague of mine called the productivity loop. And the idea was we, Home Depot, Walmart, we're going to take our profits and reinvest them in giving ever better value to our customers. So they were constantly looking at offering a better shopping experience. And I worked for this woman, Maggie, for 2 years and then got recruited away by Goldman Sachs to work there and ended up becoming the research analyst at Goldman Sachs on the Home Depot for the 12 years that I was there. Um,
Uh,
and
so how many stores were there back then? So that was in the beginning. I mean, you think about,
yeah,
I mean, Bernie was at that point in his 50s by then. And he was broke. You know the story better than I do probably, but I mean, I golfed with Bernie a few times, and I always have him telling me the story. And then I was also in board meetings with him at JCN, where he told the story also sometimes, right? But I mean, he was basically broke at 50, and had to, started Home Depot. He worked for another organization as CEO of and got fired, right?
Handy Dan.
Andy Dan's, that's right. Yeah, so you kind of knew back at the this is only a few years after all this. So boy,
That's right.
to think
What?
about where you're at then and the legend that you were around to know what he was doing is incredible.
Yeah, and a couple stories I'll share that I also learned from him and from them. I would talk to investors. Home Depot was known as the low price leader in home improvement. And I would say, who do you think has lower expenses per square foot? Home Depot or Company X, whomever the competitor was. And everybody would assume, oh, Home Depot, because they've got the lowest prices, they've got the lowest expenses per square foot. And I would say, no, Home Depot's expenses per square foot are double that of the competitor.
Wow.
And the investor would look at me like I have three heads. Like, how the heck do they do that? And I said, their sales per square foot are 4 times the competitors. So you provide the customer with a better experience, you're going to be more productive. And
Sure.
that was one of the insights. The other was I had convinced uh, the retired research director, Goldman Sachs would have what's called limited partners, people who were partners in the firm who had retired, but they would still invest and still come to the office. And occasionally they would ask to meet with research analysts. So I got asked by these two luminaries of Goldman Sachs past to have lunch with them. They wanted to hear me talk about this company, Home Depot, that I was telling everyone to buy stock in. And I gave them this whole sales pitch. And they had just, this is 1989, they had just, or 88, they had just opened in East Hanover, New Jersey, their first greater New York metro area store. And this guy, George Boyer, who was the former head of research, told me, Dave, I went into the store and like you said, the place was packed, incredible. But I got to tell you, I have a real problem with your investment recommendation. And I said, why? And he said, I saw this guy bring a return back to the front desk and complained about some small thing, and they were happy to just give him his money back. He said, that's incredibly irresponsible. And the company is going to go bankrupt. And I said, George, how many people have you told that story to? And he said, funny you should mention it. I went to a cocktail party afterwards and I told like 10 people about it. And I was like, okay, you've just contributed to their word of mouth marketing. And one of the other things we took at Uncommon Goods, um, our return policy is a forever return policy.
What?
Yes. And
Wow.
that your reaction was the same as our customer service team's reaction. They said our CEO has gone crazy. And I had an experience as a shopper. You can't see my elbows, but as a relatively thin guy, I have relatively bony, sharp elbows. My wife was very kind, bought me some flannel shirts at LL Bean, who at the time I thought were known for their quality. And within no time, I had holes in the elbows of my shirt. And I put the shirts aside and I said, okay, I'm going to return them and exchange them. And so I finally got around to it, called LL Bean up, gave them my wife's name and the order, and they said, well, we can't find it in our regular system, but we can go into our archival system and take a look if it's further back. And she gets back on the phone with me and she says, well, I found the order. It was from 5 years ago. And I was like, oh crap, it took me that long to finally get around. I mean, I had the problem in the first 6 months, but I never got around to returning. And she
Yeah.
said, do you still want to return it? And I had this moment of guilt, like,
Yeah.
it's kind of not right. And then she let me off the hook by saying, if you're not satisfied, we're not satisfied. And I said, well, to tell you the truth, I'm not satisfied. with the quality of this product. So she let me return it. And that said to me, that is a powerful way of standing behind your product and showing your loyalty. And did our return rate go up when we did that? Yes, but it's not been through the roof, and it's a great way of keeping us and our buying team and our product design and development team honest. That's a great quality check. If we're going to guarantee this product forever, we've got to make sure we're delivering quality.
Wow, that's an amazing statement. And I knew LL Bean was pretty good with that stuff. I didn't realize that strong customer service, but that's an amazing statement for them as well. So when you look at how do you so let's go into your business, but I'd like you to stop. I'd like you to eventually just kind of talk about the extra cost of that incredible customer service that needs to be built in your overhead, because if it's not there at all, it might hurt. So if you could kind of go into your whole model and how you built this and when you started on your own and then when you come across that, I'd love to talk about the cost of that amazing extreme customer service.
Sure. So, and feel free, I'm a New Yorker, I'm used to being interrupted, so feel free to interrupt if I'm going on a tangent that's of less interest. So, in terms of starting the business, so I worked from 1985 to 1999 as a research analyst studying the retail industry. In 1994, I was on a trip actually to your neck of the woods. I was in Chicago um, visiting stores and meeting with investors. And while I was there, I was visiting a friend of mine. I don't know if either of you have heard of a book called The Anxious Generation, best-selling nonfiction book of 2024 and still in the top 10, written by one of my closest friends who was a grad student at the time at University of Chicago.
Yeah, the anxious, say it again.
Generation. It's about the evils of social media, particularly as it relates to teenagers, especially teenage girls, and how it's led to depression, increase in suicide, etc. Um, Anyhow, I was visiting my friend John while I was in Chicago. He was getting his PhD in psychology at University of Chicago, and he was studying disgust. That was his focus, disgust across different cultures. Anyhow, made for fascinating conversation. But while I'm visiting with him, he shows me this thing on his laptop computer called the internet. And he said, Dave, here's the greatest repository of jokes known to mankind. It was like alt dot humor or something like that. And I remember going out with him and his then girlfriend for dinner. We were talking about the internet. I was totally uh, fascinated by it. Thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. Fast forward a year or so, Netscape comes out, and I realized that retail was going to be huge on the internet. So I started writing about it. I hosted a panel with Jeff Bezos when he was an underdog just starting out, competing against books.com, which was
Yeah,
the dominant
I remember. Yeah.
online book retailer. And so I had a front row seat to the internet taking off, and being at Goldman Sachs, I worked on eBay's initial public offering. So it was very heady days.
So this is like 97, 98. What are you thinking, Dave?
Yeah, 97, 98 into 1999. But 97, 98, I start getting my entrepreneurial itch back. I had always wanted to start my own business. Every year, I would do a gut check and say, "What's the business I'm going to start?" And I didn't have enough uh, passion or conviction to start the business. And I also felt walking away from Wall Street, where I was making a lot of money, um, if I wanted to start my business, I wanted that financial independence. So it was a tricky time, and um, but the internet was taking off, and I was sitting across from these entrepreneurs and saying, I'd much rather be doing what you're doing as opposed to writing, being a glorified movie critic. And what was funny is I then confided in some of my closest friends at Goldman, and almost every single one of them said, yeah, I want to start my own business too. And so I had this insight that most of us are closet entrepreneurs, but taking that leap is kind of scary. And for me, it was much less scary than the average entrepreneur because I had spent 14 years living like a college student and saving money from my job on Wall Street. Um, so I started thinking about, as a research analyst, I had studied the industry and tried to find a category where the margin structure was high enough that the business could be profitable and I wouldn't be competing against an Amazon or a commodity type retailer. And somewhat by accident, I went to a craft show in Washington, D.C., put on by the Smithsonian, and thought, oh my God, this is perfect. The place was a mob scene. All these customers were traveling this one weekend in April of '99 to shop at this show. But let's say, Gary, I want to buy you a birthday gift. And as much as I love you, your birthday's in August. I'm not going to be shopping for you in April. And so I thought, hey, the internet, I can put this craft show up 24/7, 365. You have a return, we can take a return. Good luck, returning your product when the circus has left town to a craft show. So that was the germ of the idea, and it really has not changed that much in the 26 years.
That's amazing. Okay, so tell us the start. I mean, who were your first couple teammates? How'd you find them? What did it look like? Did you start out of an office you had, out of your house? Tell us a little bit about all that.
Sure. So I started out of my apartment on the Lower East Side. Low break even is important, though I did forget that lesson for a while. Um, my first hire was an accidental hire where I told my assistant at Goldman, a guy named Matt, I said, Matt, I've got a great opportunity for you. I'm going to be leaving, and you can take over as the research analyst covering Home Depot and these other companies, once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. And he said, what are you going to do? And I explained it. He said, I'm coming with you.
Is that
There was nobody who I would have rather had. I mean, he was phenomenal. So it was the two of us working out of my apartment. We then hired um, somebody from abcnews.com to do the front end of the website, and we hired a chief technology officer. So it was the four of us who started the business. I funded it 100% myself.
Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Okay, so were you married with family at the time or what?
So I was a late bloomer. So I met my wife when I was 26. Um, I asked her out. She said, no, thanks. So 2 years later, she went and lived in Japan for 2 years. She came back. I tried again, and the second time was the charm. So we start going out in 91, and then we got married in 97. So I was married, but no kids. We were trying to have kids. It was proving more challenging than we thought. Um, and our first child was born 6 months after I started the business. So she was pregnant when Uncommon Goods was founded.
About 1999 or 2000. What was that?
Our son was born February of 2000, and I started the business technically June 1st of 99.
So God had quite a plan though for you, dude, because all the time you had like diving into all the intelligence that you needed to be where you're at today, all that time at Goldman to dig into the retail industry as it was then, right? And then to understand and dive into where this internet thing was going. Is it real? Is this going to be around a while? Is this going to be around a while or not? Right? All these questions you had to answer yourself. But boy, you were prepared to answer all those questions pretty readily when you were around all the biggest in the industry, the giants of the conventional retail industry, and then to meet your wife when you did, to marry that a little later, you actually had money to help fund this thing. When most
Yeah.
people, even at our age then, right, didn't save money very well, especially if they had a family early, right?
Yep. Yeah, so I would say to your first point, I would say maybe. Okay. And what I mean by that is being surrounded by experts. There was a line going on when I worked on Wall Street. They said if you took all the economists in America and lined them up across the country from head to toe,
Uh-huh.
still wouldn't reach a conclusion.
That's true.
And And there was a lot of, I mean, when I was working on Wall Street, there was a lot of controversy about the internet. A lot of the established retailers thought it was a load of BS. And so I have to say, I mean, I learned a ton from Bernie and from Sam Walton, but my philosophy that I used in getting elected to be manager of the record store of treat your workers well, was something that I knew at 18 or 20. And I sometimes think too much knowledge and too much expertise can be a bad thing. And where it hurt me, I would say, is that I tried to grow a little bit too fast. So I was able, because of all those connections, which seemed like a blessing at the time, I was able to raise a few $1 million. And what do you do when you raise a few $1 million? You spend a few $1 million. So you hire 35 people, you're going to take over the world. And then the internet bubble bursts in 2000, and you go from 35 people back down to 5 people.
Right.
And so it was a near-death experience for the business. It took me 6 years before I took my first salary. So it
Wow.
was a real slog.
So 2000, to explain what that felt like. You're just in this thing for a year, you're getting new family growing, right? And all of a sudden, 2000 happens.
Yeah, so back then every dot-com company was in California, Silicon Valley, and everybody, New York had no internet scene to speak of. And everybody that I knew in the finance world said you got to go out to Silicon Valley if you want to raise money for this business. So I go to Sand Hill Road, go to all these, top flight investors, and um, I should backtrack a minute. I was going to go in late January. My wife was due Valentine's Day, and I was going to go raise money in January. And the CEO of a company called AutoZone, uh, Peter Formanek, I had two board members, he and a guy named Steve Mandel, who runs a firm called Lone Pine, very successful investor. And he was a peer of mine, a research analyst at Goldman when I was there, two of the smartest and best people that I knew. Peter said to me, Dave, I missed the birth of my first child. My wife never forgave me, and I never forgave myself for it. He said, I know your wife's not due for a couple of weeks, but do not go. Do not miss your child's birth. And our son was born almost 2 weeks early. So
Oh, wow. Good call.
good call, but the internet bubble, and so my wife was, I don't know that she would have let me go even if I had wanted to go. That's a whole nother story. But now you have a newborn child, and are you going to leave your wife to travel for a week to California with a newborn? No. So I ended up basically losing like 2 or 3 months. And during that window is when the internet bubble burst. And I was like, oh crap, that was my window to raise money. And now it's gone. And sure enough, I went out there. They all took a meeting with me, and they either said no thanks, or the supposed best advice was, Dave, B2C is over. Business to consumer is over.
Oh man, I
You've got to
remember that.
go, you've got to go B2B, because, business to business selling, and I said, I've spent my career in retail and business to consumer, I'm not going to change my stripes just to get your money. So I said, thanks, but no thanks.
Wow.
Went home empty-handed. Um,
What a call.
yeah.
Okay, so okay, how much time are you gonna have, Dave? I say this because if we can take a 2 minute break or 5 minute break,
Yes.
I gotta go to the bathroom. And I usually don't have this problem, but I do today because I went before. Anyway, are you okay with that?
Totally. But we have to
Okay,
keep that on the podcast.
keep that on
Just
the
kidding.
podcast.
Just
Yeah,
kidding.
5 minutes, no more than 4 or 5 minutes, only.
Totally
Right?
fine.
Wow. We get to be 62, right?
Sorry.
Three times a night.
Yeah, me too. Hey, yeah, okay, so we'll continue on. Sorry about that.
No, no worries.
Yeah, young family and no check till 2000, probably 4 or 5 or something like that, right?
Yes. So I remember seeing an email, I think it was, that my wife had written to a friend of hers telling her, I think Dave's business is going to fail. And, I don't know what we're going to do or something like that. And that hurt. Um,
Yeah.
and, and Goldman Sachs had gone public. I mean, they were going public in 99 when I left. And so I walked away from a lot of stock. And so, seeing what my financial situation would have been and what the financial reality was. And honestly, the hardest thing for me, while I had made a good deal of money, I didn't move. Um, I hadn't bought a car. I bought my dad a car, but I hadn't bought myself a car. For somebody who runs a business selling things that people don't need, I'm a very thrifty, non-materialistic person. So from a lifestyle perspective and a values perspective, my wife and I, are both very down to earth. So the hardest thing for me was firing people who believed in me. That was the hardest thing, believed in me, believed in the concept. And a lot of folks, particularly programmers, quit because they were just jumping onto the next rocket ship, or so they thought. But there were a number of people who we had to let go. And to this day, I feel crappy about having done that. Um, at the same time, I learned a very powerful lesson from my son's elementary school, where they taught you do somebody wrong, apologizing is not enough. They taught children an apology of action. You've got to do something to help make it right. And so I took from those layoffs the apology of action that I am going to ensure that the company has enough money in the bank, that the profits are reinvested in the business so that when we go, not if, but when we go through the next tough period of time, I don't have to lay off 90% or 50% of the business. And so that's something that I've stuck with to this day. And while, as any business over 26 years, we've had our ups and downs and certainly have had to let a few people go, we've never gone through that massive downsizing that we had to go through because of my poor financial planning.
That's something that oftentimes we don't think about, right? We just think of the optimism of growth and your customers love us and they're just going to keep growing us. But in a tough time, even like as much as the first 2 quarters this year, where our Fortune 500 companies just froze up their budgets, they weren't spending in pavements and roofs and things that we do, right? So our revenues went way down for the first 2 quarters. Now they're feeling some stability in the tariffs and all that. That you can feel that they're feeling a little more clarity, and so now they're spending again. But our year won't be what it was expected to be.
Right.
And so you're exactly right. You have to be ready for the rainy day, right?
Yep.
That's awesome that you think that way, and we all need to think that way in business if we really care about our teammates and keeping those loyal partners, those teammates of ours on board in tough times.
Well, I would say yes, and it's a balance because you can make errors of commission by trying to grow too fast, but you can also make errors of omission by being too conservative. And so it's, that Goldilocks thing, not too hot, not too cold. You got to figure out that balance. And if you take no risk, then you're going to miss out on a ton of opportunity.
For sure. Yeah. It's a double-edged sword for sure.
Yep.
But again, having funds to get you through, 6, 7, 8 months a year, or whatever, as much as you can possibly have,
Yes.
this does make it a lot easier to take more risk and get through the tough times when they come about, because they're going to happen. They're going to be there no matter what. And
Yes.
if we assume they never will be, we're not leading our business very well at all.
Agreed.
That's awesome. Okay, so 2004 or 5, you start getting a paycheck and things are looking pretty good. Tell us where the last 20 years have taken you now.
So when we started Uncommon Goods, there was pretty much nobody like us in the market. There was a company called Aziba, E-Z-I-B-A, a company called Guild, G-U-I-L-D. They raised, I think, 60 or 80 million dollars, and lit a match to it. We lit a match to we made a much smaller fire with our initial funding. So 2004, 2005, a lot of the competitors were washed away during the dot-com bubble bursting. We were growing steadily and pretty rapidly, 40, 50% a year, and grew pretty much straight through to 2018, 2019. And over that period of time, the world really changed. So there were very few companies doing what we did, which is offering products from independent designers and makers to the general public. So stuff you might find at a craft show or might find at a design shop, real niche, creatively designed, uncommon products. We were bringing that to a broader audience. Well, 2004, Etsy came along, okay, and for their first 5 to 10 years, they grew pretty rapidly, but were still relatively small. Amazon, you know, decided they want to be a giant Hoover vacuum cleaner and vacuum up every ounce of demand in the general consumer market. So they became, some of our vendors thought, hey, I want to have my cake and eat it too. I'll sell to Uncommon Goods. I'll sell on Etsy. And I'm going to sell on Amazon too, and didn't have that kind of loyalty, channel loyalty. And so, as a shopper, what's the first thing a shopper does when they get our print catalog or see an online ad? They'll go to Amazon and say, hey, can I get it same day or tomorrow for the same or lower price? So we found the market got way more competitive, basically because our suppliers started selling direct themselves and selling through Amazon. And I saw the writing on the wall and said, okay, we can't be a victim here. We've got to be an actor. And the way to be an actor is to go to that vendor. And Chris, if you're selling to me, I'll say to you, hey, Chris, we really want to buy this set of glassware from you, and we're willing to buy X thousand units if you'll only sell it to us. And it doesn't have to be a forever deal, but let's make it for a window of time and make it renewable if it's worth your while. So we started doing that. And then, Gary, we might go to you and say, hey, we have this idea for a product. Can you co-create this product with us? We'll handle the manufacturing, but we want your design expertise. So we built out a product design and development team, which is now 20% of our business. And we built out the negotiating muscle for exclusivity with some of our existing vendors. And so today, nearly half of the products we sell are exclusive to us. And we've also, in the last 3 years, started doing our own in-house manufacturing, personalization, engraving here in Brooklyn. So that's also helped.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. So you basically made it so much easier for them to do business with you exclusively. And did you once you do these things and you develop that product design process for them and you do all these things for them differently than the other competitors did, were you able then to have an exclusivity like a contract or anything or no?
Yes, yes. So, but again, I don't want, if it's our idea, sort of our intellectual property, then it's ours. But if you come up with the idea and we're all excited about it and we're wrong, our customer just doesn't love it as much as we hope. I don't want you to be a prisoner of our exclusivity arrangement. So we want it, somebody once said to me, uh, we're looking to win customers, not transactions. And I would say the same is true with our vendors. We want partnerships, not just one-off relationships. I think I've demonstrated after 26 years that I'm in this for the long haul.
Yeah,
And, we really want to build long-term partnerships. So yes, we do get exclusive contracts, but again, I was at a session yesterday with our team where we were talking about negotiating in contracts. And I said, I can have the best contract in the world that says this, you're only going to sell this pen to us. But the contract is not worth nearly as much as the relationship. Because if you, Gary, believe in our partnership, you're not going to do what some other vendor might do, which says, hey, that red clip on the pen? I'm going to make that purple and I'm going to sell it on Amazon. Okay.
sure.
And, I can get all the lawyers I want in the world. I'm not going to win that lawsuit because it's a different product. Color is integral to the design of the product. And so it really is less the contracts and more the relationships. But contracts do help discourage people from going astray.
For sure. Yeah, I think just to have it documented, is a big thing. So people can see and understand it, say, yes, I agree. Good people,
Yep.
don't challenge that if it's all done with good, great integrity.
Yep. Agreed.
So 18, 19 growth happened. When you look at growth, was that from 4 employees to 100 employees? Was it from,
So
you know,
we got up to about 2018 pre-COVID, and during COVID we got shot out of a cannon. But pre-COVID, we were at about, I'd say, 140 to 150. COVID, one of my favorite expressions from Wall Street is don't confuse brains with a bull market. And you had all these people selling on the internet who thought they were geniuses in 2020 and 2021 when the government's throwing stimulus checks at people and telling people not to leave their homes. And so they're not going to restaurants, they're not going out to concerts. They're not going to Barcelona, not traveling. And so they've got this discretionary income and they're spending it on internet retail. And so our business boomed. Our ad costs went through the roof and our transportation costs went through the roof, but our revenue went through the roof with them. So everything was fine for 2 years. And then 2022, the bill came due. There was the post-COVID hangover where people started spending money on things other than internet retail. So our revenue came back to earth. But unfortunately, even though retailers online weren't advertising as much, restaurants or travel or whatever were still buying up those ad dollars. So our online ad costs didn't come down and our transportation costs didn't come down. So our company had our first loss in 20 years in 2022. And we had to shrink a bit. So we had gotten up to probably about 200 team members at our peak year round. And we've come back down to about where we were pre-COVID and um, working on getting back to that growth mode.
What are lessons you learned in 20, because we had some of the same stuff happen, right? 2022, since then, same type of stuff. We had to come down to earth on some of our businesses where, customers are spending wildly and their budgets have come down. What kind of some of the lessons you've learned from 2022 to 2025 today, and where do you think you're stronger now than you were because of it, or weaker or whatever?
Yeah, so I'd say having done this for 26 years, you tend to see the same movie. So I don't know that there was so much that I learned, maybe had reinforced or relearned. And Gary, you mentioned differentiation before. I think, I mean, our name is all about differentiation, uncommon goods. And I
So
you can, or I can, one can coast a bit when you have the wind at your back, and you're very focused on, hey, we have to get more warehouse space. We've got to get a third-party distributor to help us handle demand. And as a CEO, you can get caught up in what I'll call the logistics of the business and stop reinvesting in that differentiation or that core. And so I would say that was something that when the business came back to earth, we did not have enough programs in the work for remarkable new product. And so, that's where we've doubled down. I came up with the idea a couple of years ago of uh, putting QR codes on product. So you get up for your morning cup of coffee. Gary, what's your sign?
Aries.
Aries. Okay. I don't know what your feeling is about horoscopes, but a lot of people believe in them. So
Yeah,
we'll sell you a mug that's attractively decorated for the sign of Aries. And built into that design is a QR code, and you point your phone at it, and every day you'll get a new horoscope uh, from Uncommon Goods. Or if, Chris, you're really into literature, we've got a book lovers mug, and one of the books on the bookshelf has a QR code built into it, and every day there's a new literary quote. So that's a product category we invented and came up with. And that old expression, necessity is the mother of invention. When you can't ride the COVID wave, you better double down and make sure you're inventing new product.
for sure. And I see this so often. I love what you said. When is at your back, right? You tend to coast a little bit. You're reactionary. You're serving their customers with new growth and new responsibilities, distribution or whatever it is, right? You got to gear up as the wind's at your back, and oftentimes, right, you lack the need, right, to discover new things. You said lack of remarkable products. I get that because we've experienced exactly the same thing. And so when you think about this, is there a team that you think about that you have now, or that we should all think about having, that in good times they're living, and they're every day they're thinking as if we're in tough times, right? Is there a way to think about that differently than we all do? Because it seems like that happens over and over again.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny thinking about Bernie Marcus because he had that running scared mentality. He always had that fear that somebody was going to knock him off or outdo him. And what was it? Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, had a line, "Only the paranoid survive." So I think ideally it's not a department in the company. Ideally, it's everybody at the company is, and it's become a cliche, but it's customer centric. What are you doing to listen to the customer? And what are you doing to fix the problems and constantly make it better? And I think everybody in the organization having that mindset is critical.
Give me that quote again that you heard. Only the what?
Paranoid.
I like it.
I think that's the title of his best-selling book from 30 years ago.
Only the paranoid survive.
Yeah.
I like that. And I always like hungry dogs run faster, right? Stay hungry,
Yep.
and you'll be fine. You'll be in better shape than otherwise. But that's a great way to think about it. And so now think about where you're at today, and where do you want to go? When you look 10 years out, what do you feel like is the vision or the place you want to be, and that you will be?
So as we talked about at the beginning, the most important thing for me is actually not making money. It's having a positive impact. And it sounds corny, and I think a lot of companies will do some version of greenwashing to get the so-called conscious consumer to shop with them. But for me, it happens to be the truth. And so I would think about concentric circles. The first circle is our team. And so my goal over the next 10 years is to have shared prosperity with our team. And everybody who's a year-round team member at our company has options to own a stake in the business. The company is close to 70% owned by insiders, including me. And what I want to allow our team to do is every year be able to sell some of their shares at a profit in addition to what they earn at the company. And I'm contemplating whether uh, to go with an employee ownership. I'm 62. I'm not going to live forever. Unlike you, I have different views about family and the business. I want my Thanksgiving dinner to be all about my kids and grandkids, and I don't want to be thinking about how my son might have done something that I would have done differently. But yours, I think, is also probably a more stable business than the retail business. But in any case, so I'm thinking about succession, but I really want to have an enduring impact and the business to be a model of how we can do well and do good. And we pay a starting wage of $21 an hour for our warehouse, seasonal warehouse workers. Our year-round workers earn more than that. I want to continue. Obviously, it's a meritocracy. We don't pay that for people who don't perform, but I want to continue to be an engine of opportunity for our team members. We've had seasonal warehouse workers who have gone on to become computer programmers at our company. And so continuing, I would say, to drive that. And from a business perspective, continuing to come up with more and more remarkable products that our customers think they can't live without.
I
Um,
like it. And tell me the circle of your team, right? Shared prosperity, equity, ownership, right? For that team. What's
yeah,
the next
that's
circle?
the next circle, I would say, are our vendors.
Yep.
Um, I want to make sure that we treat them fairly. And we've worked with, I was just speaking with one yesterday, uh, who I'm introducing a student to who wants to learn about being a designer for his career. This is a vendor we've worked with for 25 years, and those relationships are invaluable. So I want to be able to continue to have Uncommon Goods support that vendor base. And then the third is the broader community. And Gary, we were talking at the beginning, you know, about differences in views, political views, and how we need civility. One thing I feel fairly strongly about, and I try to walk the walk, is that we as a society have at times demonized poverty. And I see firsthand in my business people who are working two jobs. We hire close to 1,000 people during the holiday season, and a lot of them are working at Uncommon Goods as a second job. These are people who want to better themselves, better their lives. And the fact that we haven't raised the federal minimum wage for 16 years, a dollar in 2009 when the minimum wage was raised to 7.25 is $1.51 today, and the minimum wage hasn't budged. And I am a huge believer in hard work, but I also feel that um, there is a minimum level. And so having that's an issue. And I've tended to focus on New York when it comes to policy because I've seen how effective trying to advocate on a federal level tends to be. It's like spitting in the wind. But
Yeah, yeah.
I was very involved in getting the minimum wage in New York increased about 8 years ago and getting it indexed to inflation so it's depoliticized. And it's not $30 an hour, which some people might advocate. You'll have a lot of businesses go away or move elsewhere. And another thing I believe in, which again I think should be a bipartisan issue, um, is paid family leave. So in 1994, the government came out with FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, which sounds wonderful, which is if you work at a company of over 50 people and you have a newborn or you have a very sick relative that you have to care for, your job is protected for a certain window of time. That sounds great. And if I'm making 200 grand a year, fine. What if I'm making 725 an hour? Am I going to be able to afford to take a month off or 2 months off? And so politicians talk about family values. I think no better way to put your money where your mouth is. And it actually doesn't cost the government a dime. It's it's like Social Security. The individual pays for it, 30 cents an hour. That's not even that. I don't even know what the cost is, but it's a relatively small cost per hour for the business and the team member. And it's something that I believe in and I'd love to see on a bipartisan basis. Interestingly, I actually got a call from Tucker Carlson last fall. I thought it was a prank call. It's like, why does he want to talk to me? I'm not a titan of industry. And we had a lengthy conversation, and he actually was 100% on board with a higher minimum wage. So my hope is that that could come to pass.
Yeah, and you know what, there's both sides of that. And I think the conversation is a conversation that if we continue to have it, great things will happen. Because there's people on the one side of it that believe that, hey, I want that to be my competitive advantage to treat my teammates like family and give them that paid time off and all that. If everybody's forced to do it, it's no longer like an advantage to me. But on the whole, if the culture is that it just doesn't happen very often, if it's my competitive advantage, but 90% of the rest of the world doesn't do it, and actually families suffer for that, there should be a great conversation on both sides for sure. When we look at minimum wage, same thing. We've got some states that are we're losing business in some cases because of the minimum wage standards have gone up pretty fast. And some small business say, I'm going to the state next door that doesn't have this challenge because I can be more competitive. We don't want to lose business and jobs because of it, right? But where is the happy medium? And my opinion is the happy medium only happens if there's good conversations on both sides of that, right? Both sides of that, instead of the opposite happens. A strong blue state just does it, and they do it at the cost of jobs. A strong red state does none of it, and then they do the cost of family, right? So there's a happy medium there, and
Yes.
just as you and I continue to say, we with good conversation, right, and respectful conversation, good things happen.
Totally. No, I agree.
So when we think of that impact, I think that's that so many of my friends that really believe in the same thing. Their job is to make an impact in the world before they leave it, and our businesses are a great tool to do that. I mean, if we got a great job somewhere, we can make an impact with family and community still. If we got a great job, right? But boy, when we have a business that produces so much opportunity like you do and we do, now it's our obligation, in my opinion, to make a positive impact to the community, to the world, right? Whatever that is, it could be in the dozens of people, it could be in the millions of people, depending on how we look at impact and what do we have as far as business that can deliver that. Your business, fortunately, has a lot of opportunity, in my opinion, to deliver an impact, right? When it comes to getting amazing small businesses in front of the world, right? These. So my sister is somebody that's really does an awesome job with craft. She makes cards like birthday cards by hand that you cannot throw away, right? You want to put them on the wall, and again, but yet she does it in a small way, and I see people like that as having the opportunity to be their own small business, doing what they love doing, and that's making an impact. When you think about the businesses that you can help survive as actual small businesses because of your reach, that's incredible, right? That's got to be exciting as can be.
Right. And businesses often are demonized. And, I got involved helping start a education nonprofit in a high school with predominantly low-income kids. And it was eye-opening to me because, what do these kids want? They want a job. Okay. What's
Yeah,
the greatest job program out there? It's private enterprise. And then what's the next most fundamental need? I would say right up there is health insurance. Okay. Where do most people get their health insurance? It's from work, And so, these companies that are often portrayed as being evil are actually having a huge positive impact.
absolutely. Bert, that's where I got to know Bernie well, Dave, was he started Job Creators Network. I was a vendor of his. He knew me through a couple of golf outings I met him at, and then asked me to be one of the first CEOs in Job Creators Network, an organization that was his vision. It's still going strong nowadays, and I'm still a board member. And all Bernie wanted to do was protect small business, to say, hey, we're a big business now, right? We're a titan in the industry. But guess what? He goes, I want to make sure that the Home Depot of 1982 or three, or whatever it is, has a better opportunity to survive, because he believed that government was getting too big, and with the regulatory environment, Home Depot would never have happened again. And so I agreed with him. I became a board member, one of his first 5 board members, because I saw it myself, right? Where my little business I started with a couple $1,000s could never survive today in the regulatory environment we have today. Now, some of that regulation is necessary, but a lot of it's not. And so basically, his vision was to protect small business. And how cool is that somebody that didn't need to spend time
Right.
worried about small business, and actually, as you and I both know, sometimes the business gets really big and they want to stunt the growth of those small businesses that are challenging them, right? And so, I think if we can all, take a little of that, a page out of that ourselves, like you just mentioned, right? When we can support small business, America is a way better place to be. When your story that's told, Dave, for sure, people are going to be inspired by your story and say, wow, this guy, went through a lot of tough times, but man, he took a loss in potentially a payout, right? That you did because you had this vision and you had tough times, but you worked your way through this vision. And in the long run, you're going to have more opportunity than you would ever had, than Goldman Sachs, even the great company that it is, by building your own dream and helping others with their dream, right?
Yes.
Pretty cool.
Agree.
We are blessed to be in this part of this American dream, right?
100%.
Hey, how many kids do you have all together now?
Much less ambitious than you. Two.
2. All right. Boy, girl, what?
Two sons,
Awesome.
25 and 22.
And do they like the entrepreneurial world too? Are they trying to follow their dad or no?
I don't know. And, one thing I got from my parents, you know, both the self-confidence, was part of it. And the other part was do what you want, follow your own path, follow your own dream. And so I've really encouraged our sons to do that. So one works for PwC as a consultant, and the other is getting a dual engineering and physics degree and worked this
Wow.
summer on flood mitigation in New York related to the East River. So,
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, so they're following your footsteps then, because those are challenging jobs they're taking out at a young age, and the experience both of them are going to gain is going to be incredible. And if they want to go after their own entrepreneurial endeavor, they're going to be so qualified because they've got you as a mentor right in their own family, and then they've got all these businesses.
sometimes they appreciate that advice.
Yeah, in my opinion, they appreciate way more than you think. But so hey, what we like to do is Chris and I go over kind of what we talked about, and then pull out the cool like nuggets of in our opinions, success. The nuggets that create success basically in different businesses, right? And some of these will be things we see a lot with great entrepreneurs. Some are kind of uncommon. Okay. So Chris, take it away, buddy, and let's go back and forth to Dave on a few of these things. I know Dave's time is very valuable, and we want to respect that.
Yeah, Dave, thank you so much, man. You're such a great storyteller. I was just enraptured the whole time, and I got a ton of great insights and one-liners that we've done 150 of these episodes or so, and I'm just like, how have we not heard this before?
Well, I may be a decent storyteller, but Gary can tell you I don't hold a candle to Bernie Marcus, who could have been a stand-up comedian if he wanted.
Yeah, it could have been.
Awesome. So yeah, these are a couple of my favorite things you shared. Don't judge a man until you've walked a mile in their steel-toed boots. The inverted pyramid means the boss is the customer. I never connected those dots. I've heard the inverted pyramid a ton of times. Meet every hire in person to discuss company philosophy. Reinvest profits to continuously offer customers a better experience. Provide the customer with a 2x more expensive experience, and you'll outsell competitors 4x.
Well, if you invest that 2x properly, if you piss the 2x away, you'll go straight to chapter 11.
Yes, that is key. Offer a forever return policy. If they're not satisfied, we're not satisfied. An apology is not enough. An apology of action is enough. Look, and this is my favorite one. Look to win customers, not transactions.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of the same stuff, and because yeah, some really fun things you talk about, and I love the fact that these are rags to riches stories, okay, and yours is another great rags to riches story, and they don't come easy, as we always say, but your name itself, from the swamp, Bolotsky from the swamp is a great start, okay. And then you're also your business name, uncommon goods, right? I mean, I believe you differentiate or you really you die if you don't differentiate and provide more value, a culture where you're willing to do things differently and change industries. Your chance of survival is not that great, especially your chance to thrive is not that great. And your name, your name starts out with that, right? And then inverted triangle, I think, is so important. And I learned that from reading one of Bernie's books, and I practice it as well. As much as I think we can get away from it sometimes. As a CEO, the chairman, the leader, some people think, okay, I've made it. I'm at the top. No, man, no, you haven't made it. You're at the bottom now. You're at the bottom. If you don't serve those customers and you don't serve your teammates to serve those customers well, you'll be at the bottom of wherever you want to, of opportunity in the long run, and you'll lose. And part of that is you mentioned basically building relationships and not being transactional. Same thing, right? If we're not building great relationships with your teammates and your customers, right? You're just another number. It's another, you're looked upon as a company that just really wants to do the transaction one after another. And when you're treated that way, you really don't have the reoccurring customer base, because they realize you don't really love them as much as somebody else might. So I
Right.
think that's such an important point. When I think about also, there's so many in life. I believe that there's advantages to take, whether you start a family early, or God blesses you the family a little later. Boy, a lot of people squander those early years before they have that great wife and that great family. You are patient. I mean, no fancy cars. You didn't buy a big house. You didn't do any of that. And some people probably said, what are you doing, Dave? What are you doing with all this money? Spend it, man, spend it. But boy, not many people have the story you have, where they're patient, and then we're able to invest their own money and grow their own dream because of patience. Just not that common today, for sure. People want it all now. And that's a lesson that boy, you can teach that lesson like not many people that I know. So I love apology of action. I think that you made me think about some things that I have to do right now in my life. I feel like I want to reach out to some people that I think I was right, maybe right. I think I did the right thing, but it doesn't matter. It probably hurt on their end a bit, and I need to really apologize and show some action that I care about those people. So I've got a couple names on my list that I'm gonna actually reach out to because of that thought that you gave. You can as a business leader, you can let people go. You can make tough decisions and think it's the right thing for the business. It's the right thing for the rest of the team. But that doesn't mean that there's not some apology of action. I love that terminology. I've never heard that before, and I really like that. I mean, all these things just go back to why you've had success, why you've had stability in your relationships, and you're an amazing example to what what the American dream is, right? Not only just building something for yourself, but really building something for enduring impact that makes a difference in the lives of your teammates, your vendors, your community. Um, you're the ditch digger CEO we love, brother.
Well, thank you. And you mentioned the apology of action. I shared earlier that I'm Jewish. I'm not terribly religious, but one of the Jewish traditions, the Jewish New Year, is a holiday called Rosh Hashanah, which was last week. And then there's what's called the Day of Atonement, which is Yom Kippur, which starts tonight. And during that 8-day period, the so-called book, God's book, is open. It's like you can edit how you did over the past year. And so this is supposed to be the window of time where you, in essence, make those apologies of action, it's an interesting tradition.
Okay, give me what do you call this? Not this time, Alan?
So the problem is, given that I'm not Mr. Super Jew, I don't know all the terminology, but if you Googled it, it's the time between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur in English is known as, Rosh Hashanah is the Jewish New Year. Yom Kippur is the Day of Atonement. So as skinny as I am, I won't be eating for 24 hours. And you're supposed to repent for your sins. But in that window, the the book is inscribed, and during that time is when you can change what is written for the year.
I like it. I like it. I've heard, and I've got a bunch of my friends, actually, my business forum, and outside that, our friends of mine are Jewish, and I hear them talk about this, but really, I've never dug into that, and that's a great point. How nice to be able to look back and say, okay, what did I do right? But boy, really, what did I do that I could be better at in the last year, right? So.
And two other things real quick I want to share. One, the point you were just making, and this was something as somebody who I would say was fairly insecure, and that insecurity drove me, made me less open to criticism and more defensive when I was criticized. And one of the big aha moments I had early in the business was forget about your motivation. Your criticism of me is a gift. Okay. And rather than my saying, Gary, well, you ain't so perfect yourself, which was my normal
Yeah.
response, it's pretend it's wrapped in a bow, and that criticism is a gift to teach me how to be better. When I was on Wall Street, somebody once said to me, Dave, what do you do about a stock when the CEO says business is great, it couldn't be better? And I said, what do you do? And he said, you short the stock. Because if it can't get better, it's going to get worse. And so
Yeah, that's right.
somebody goes up to you and says, Gary, you're the sun, the moon, and the stars. You're perfect. Well, first of all, with all due respect, that means they're not perfectly observant because
No,
none of us are perfect. And then
no.
you can't get any better. And so taking that criticism, whether it's for you as a leader, an individual, or for your business, and incorporating that, you may be familiar with the company Uline.
Of course, I know the owners there from this area.
Okay.
Dick and Beth, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so I know, oh boy, I'm now embarrassed and it's being recorded. Who's their number two, right?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I'll tell you in a second. My 62-year-old hard drive is not.
So I know Dick's got a guy that's his main person as chief of staff, and Richard.
Jake Peters. I don't know if you
Okay.
know Jake, but great guy. And one of the things, I was in a knowledge sharing group with Jake, and he shared with me how Uline takes customer criticism, customer feedback, and basically integrates it into how they run and improve their business. The one other thing I wanted to share is in my orientations where I meet with our seasonal team members, I typically have a TV monitor on the screen, screen behind me. And I say, when I was 36 years old starting the business, I could have shot a video telling you how important you are to the business. And CEOs are all about efficiency, right? I said, why do you think I'm here? And basically, I talk to them. I say, when you shop on the internet, I say, what's the ultimate moment of truth? And a lot of times they'll say, oh, when I click checkout, when I put my credit card number in, I say, no, I can promise you the sun, the moon, and the stars. The moment of truth is if and when that package arrives at your doorstep. And I said, do I control that as the all-powerful CEO? Hell no. I said, you control that. And the reason I meet with you is because I want you to care, okay? And my showing up here is just symbolic. It's a half hour of my time. But my showing up in this orientation is symbolic, but it's a small way of showing respect for the importance of the work that they do.
For sure. I love it. I love it. No, I agree. And I can't tell you how important that is. And not all of us in my case as well are the best at that, thinking this way. Criticism is a gift. I mean, if every one of our businesses from the person that's in the field, who has to listen to the customer once in a while, our person in the office, right? If every one of those has that same mentality, boy, what a difference, we'd be making.
Right.
And to be able to weigh every criticism as a gift and say, okay, how can we use this? And some criticism you might not be able to use, but so much of it you can, right? So I love it. That's amazing. Well, Dave, really our pleasure to spend the time with you today and listen to your story. Our listeners are going to be blessed with your story for their own motivation as small to large entrepreneurs or people in business that want to understand how an entrepreneur thinks. So we really appreciate your time today.
I appreciate yours. It was a pleasure to meet you both and talk to you. Thank you. And if you're ever in New York, let me know.
Well, I am there once in a while, and then same thing. If you're ever in Chicago, let us know that. And then Naples 7 months a year nowadays. So if you're ever down there visiting Naples too, I'll take you out to breakfast or lunch at one of those expensive Naples restaurants.
Terrific. All right.
Well, thanks for everything. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And till next time, guys, thanks for listening to Ditch Digger CEO. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.